Welcome to Golf Training Hacks. To generate power in the golf swing or any other sports movement, you need to have stable joints. I think that's obvious. Now, one way you can destabilize joints is through injuries. So for example, if you have multiple shoulder separations, then the ligaments and connective tissue of that shoulder will be stretched and permanently stretched. That means that less and less force can re-separate that shoulder. But injuries are not the only way that you can create destabilized joints. Limited range of motion in joints can also destabilize joints. So for example, an athlete who has less external rotation in their hips than is required when they're running, that's going to destabilize the knee joint. Now here's how. To make up for the lack of hip external rotation, when the foot is planted, it's going to turn out a little bit, and that's going to send the knee in a little bit into a valgus position. And that puts the knee joint in a very unstable position. So when the force of landing in a deceleration or landing in a change of direction hits that knee, it's going to put a lot of stress on the ACL, because the ACL now is stretched to its limit, and you do that enough times, it's going to rupture. In the golf swing, stiff hips can destabilize the lumbar spine, the lumbar vertebral joint. And that's a problem because there's so many lower back injuries and so much lower back pain amongst golfers. Now here's how that works. If you have stiff hips, then the lack of rotation in your hips is going to be made up somewhere, and often it's made up in the lumbar spine. But the lumbar vertebral joints are not set up to rotate as much as your hips, your T-spine, and your shoulders. So that means that with every golf swing, you're sending your vertebral joints in your lumbar spine to end range positions, and you're stressing those end range positions quite a bit. Now you do that over and over again, year after year, round after round, practice session after practice session, and keep touching the limits, and maybe even going over the limits of your vertebral joints in your lumbar spine, and you're going to weaken the disc walls. Now, when you weaken the disc walls, eventually there's going to be a rupture and you get a bulge. Now, weakened disc walls and a bulge in the disc walls destabilizes the disc wall. It makes it less able to limit movement. And that's one of the big functions, one of the most important functions of your disc. Your discs are there in part to limit movement. So when the walls become weakened and there's a rupture, they're less able to limit movement. So that means it destabilizes the joint. And also, if the joint is destabilized and there's more movement in that joint, then ligaments will get stretched, and that further destabilizes the joint. You can think of it like driving the car on a half-inflated tire. So that tire is half-inflated and it's very squishy. The walls are not stiff, and you lose control of the car. When the walls are stiffened, you have much more control of the car. It's the same thing with your discs. So the point being, if you want to stabilize joints, you need to have mobility. You need to have movement options in the joints, because if you don't, if your movement options are limited, then other movement compensations will be made to make up for the limit of movements in specific joints. If you want to improve the stability of your joints, you might need more mobility, because with limited range of motion, with limited movement options in the joint, well then, there's going to be movement compensations to make up for the lack of movement options. And that often places joints in unstable positions and causes injury. So, if you want to stabilize your joints, think about improving mobility. At Golf Training Hacks, we not only want you to play better golf, but we want you to move better and feel better every day, so you can play the best golf of your life for the rest of your life.